Brianna Beretta, and I'm here with the Flyers insider for 97.3 ESPN, Kevin Durso, and we are going to be breaking down the last week for the Flyers. So they're on a 5-game win streak right now. We saw them have a win streak earlier in the season, but what do you think is contributing currently to their win streak?
It's a multitude of factors, really. I mean, they're playing pretty carefree at this point. It's kind of like that mindset when you know you're playing with house money at this point. They really have gone so far above and beyond expectations, and I think they realize that. So now they're just looking at everything that could possibly come their way. I think that the game against Winnipeg last Saturday is a great example because the odds were stacked against them. You know, Jamie Drysdale's sick, Sean Couturier's hurt. They can't play in that game. Winnipeg had the best record, had the most points in the NHL going into it. They're on an 8-game winning streak. They're on a 14-game point streak. Everything says the Flyers are going to lose that game. And they go out and they shut them out 2-0 instead. It's that mindset that who cares what everything else says when it's all stacked against you. They just go out and, I'm not trying to borrow John Tortorella's line here, but they just go out and play. And they really don't seem to care what anybody thinks about expectations or what anybody seems to think this team is supposed to be doing or isn't capable of doing. They continue to defy the odds that have been stacked against them for the duration of the season. And now I think people are starting to look at them even more in a different lens. They're seeing that this is a team at this point, in another week's time, we're going to be having another discussion and we'll be approaching 50 games in the season. It's getting to a point where you stop talking about how surprising this is, and it just becomes who they are. And it continues to shift in that direction, that this is who they are. They're a team that just works hard together and has such unity that they find a way to win more times than they don't. And it's continuing to show night after night.
We talked about playoffs kind of a little bit earlier, a couple weeks ago, and we were kind of like in that notion where it was too early to think about it. It's a rebuilding year, but now they're projected 69% chance of making the playoffs. What do you think will actually kind of pull them together to make them a full playoff contender this season?
Yeah, I don't read too much into the percentages that they're supposed to make the playoffs or not, because I think that changes on a daily basis anyway. At one point in time, I think I had seen it up in the 70s at one point and then drop back into the 50s and it's not anything that the Flyers do. Those percentages change based on what people think other teams will do, and their expectations are higher. Like, I know New Jersey's percentage has been sometimes above 50%, even though it's the standings say they're not in the playoffs at the moment, things like that. What they need to do is just stay with this thing. I mean, at this point in time, the room is tight. You can tell it's tight, that they play for each other. They don't have, and I'm sure we're going to talk about individuals as we kind of have this discussion, because there's individuals worth talking about, but they don't really have a guy who necessarily is the star of the team. They really just seem to have a bunch of guys that one night it's this player, the next night it's somebody different who's the hero of the game, who's changing this whole thing. And as that kind of goes along, you end up having this committee of players that make it all work. And that's the unique aspect of their team. I was looking at the overall points in terms of players' points for the season. They don't have anybody that even comes close to the numbers that you look at among superstars. They don't even have anybody close. And yet they're in the top 10 in the league standings. And with a little bit of a buffer now, there's a little bit of a comfort level to being there. Like, they're kind of consistently finding themselves in that 9 to 12 range in the league standings. At some point in time, you stop pretending this is just something that's kind of fun and, oh, this is a cute way to start the season. Look at how they're overachieving. And it just becomes that this is where they kind of belong, because they continue to do things with consistency. And I think the consistency is what's grown, especially during this month. I was skeptical as the month started because of the way that their previous road trip had gone out of the holiday break. It's like, okay, maybe this is where the wheels fall off. And now they've not only gotten it back on course, but they've played 2 or 3 pretty dominant games in a row. And the types of opponents that they're playing too, like, it all lines up that they're doing things that, as unexpected as they were, you can't ignore the trend that they're on and how it builds to being that's what builds to being a playoff team. If you want to be a playoff team, you go out and beat teams that everybody knows are going to be in the playoffs, and you do it in the fashion that we saw them do against Dallas or against Winnipeg, and take those teams that we, by this point, probably know are going to be there in April and May. They're going to be around. And maybe the Flyers have a shot to be around too if this is what they're able to do on a nightly basis.
We were talking, you said about individual players, and the Flyers have sort of struggled with their offense throughout the season, especially power play wise, and just really putting goals up on the board. Lately, it's been a kind of mix. Owen Tippett has been really hot. Morgan Frost had 2 assists last night. What do you think that these players stepping up means for the offense in a whole?
It's massive for them because, I had conversations, whether with you or on the Sports Bash or whatever, where it's like, at some point in time, somebody not named Travis Konechny and Joel Farabee has
Mhm,
to go out and score a goal. And they have guys who can. Tippett was always capable of it. He just kind of had to get on one of these heaters like he's been on. And boy, has he ever found it. I mean,
mhm,
he's just he one upped himself in Thursday's game from a really great, just a great goal on Monday. And then that was purely, but what we saw on Thursday night, that was sensational. I would argue good luck finding a goal better this year.
mhm,
It's really hard to find something like that. And there, everybody who talked about it afterwards is right about that. It's not something that you go into and kind of necessarily premeditate that you're going to score like that. You just go out and do whatever the game gives you, and
mhm,
you're completely reactionary. And when you're feeling as confident as he is, and I'll lump Morgan Frost into it too, because Frost, the pass that he made on Sean Walker's goal, that's confidence. That's playing to a level that maybe you didn't have earlier in the year. I give Frost a ton of credit in particular, more not more so than Tippett. What Tippett's doing is incredible, but Tippett's really had more consistency over the year and been in the lineup with more consistency. What Frost has had to go through in and out of the lineup to still have that confidence to make a play like that and to show his playmaking ability, that says a lot about his character and why he's such a fit for the room, and kind of goes back to the whole conversation about guys who are not here now that were last year and how that had to change. The room
mhm,
had to change. You have guys who buy in like that and understand, maybe don't completely understand why they're in and out of the lineup, but go with it anyway, try to improve themselves. This all aligns for Frost anyway. It all aligns with having a conversation about why was he coming out of the lineup with John Tortorella, and really kind of taking that step to push back on the coach a little bit about, why am I coming out of the lineup when I feel like I've been playing better? Why me? And has translated into more confident play. And you're seeing him do that. You're seeing Tippett do it. I think you brought up the power play too. Cam Atkinson scoring again finally.
mhm,
Like it was a long time coming for him, but maybe that opens some things up. And there's another guy who hasn't contributed goal scoring wise who starts to add another element to this thing. So they've got guys who, as it kind of builds up, when you can take away the fact that it's one or two guys providing everything, and that's kind of why the road trip that came out of the holiday break went the way that it did. If it's all Travis Konechny all the time, not that you want Konechny slowing down by any stretch of the imagination. If it's all him all the time, then one player is not going to carry this team
mhm,
to wins on a nightly basis. Maybe a game or two, but not nightly. They get this kind of level of contribution where you're talking 4 or 5 forward. That was just forwards, by the way, too. We didn't even talk about defensemen, but
mhm.
4 or 5 forwards who jump in and make a difference. That's going to translate to a lot more success, and it's going to give you the results like you've seen. The more more convincing victories, the more complete victories that they've had. So it all kind of lines up and it all works itself out that's why, there's reason behind why these things are happening. They're playing as a team, more guys are contributing, and as a result, you're getting wins against playoff caliber teams that maybe you didn't think they would compete with.
You said how there's players who aren't scoring, but they're stepping up and they're making plays for his team. Jamie Drysdale, since he's come over, especially being on the power play, he got his first point at the first home game he played, but he's been so huge in making plays, making passes, keeping the puck in the zone, and getting the puck up. How do you think he's adjusting to this new team and this new style of play compared to Anaheim?
Well, I think it was unfortunate for him that he got sick when he didn't, and understandable. Obviously, he had a whirlwind of a week, and illness was kind of maybe bound to happen for him. It just is unfortunate that he missed a couple of games as a result of that, because there was a lot of excitement building from the first 2 games he played. We talked last after his first game, and then he goes on the road. He had an entry in Minnesota that just showed off his skating ability
Mhm,
to the maximum. And he's done it on like maybe shorter spurts in the other in last night's game, for example, but that was really impressive to me. And I think he's another player that, and maybe from the defensive side, that's going to fit the mold of kind of what Owen Tippett's doing right now, because
Mhm.
with Tippett and Travis Konechny falls into this category too. Tortorella talks about not putting reins on them from an offensive standpoint. Just let them go out and do what they do best and play to their strengths in that area, and teach a few things in the other areas to balance out the game more.
Mhm.
Drysdale's not doing anything spectacular defensively. There's learning that's going to come from that, but you don't want to put any, you don't want to put any handcuffs on him in terms of the offensive ability, letting him jump into the play. He didn't even really jump into many plays against Dallas. Like, it wasn't a staple of his game in that particular night. And other defensemen were, like, you see Sean
Mhm.
Walker score the goal that he did, and it's a jump into the play thing. That's probably what they want to see more of from Drysdale as this goes. Obviously, he was just coming back from basically a week off. So again, another adjustment period, but it's not like he's not afraid to
Mhm.
reach another gear and skate. It's the biggest strength of his game is his skating. So he's definitely willing to do that. He's had moments on the power play where he walks the line really well, and just that subtle movement. I mean, he didn't get an assist on the power play goal, but he was directly involved in it. He had the one of the first passes that
Mhm.
started that whole play. And it's not any, again, it was just like his assist on Morgan Frost's power play goal in his first game in Philadelphia.
Mhm.
It's nothing special. It's not like something that you're going to find on a highlight reel in terms of, to the level of Owen Tippett's goal or anything like that. But it's a play that you wish you would see made every single night, because that's part of what they struggled with so much in the start of the year with the power play, was just even making that simple play that helped the movement better and helped them get into a situation where someone's going to be open to get a good quality shot.
Mhm.
And that's now it's happened twice on the power play. And Drysdale was also, he was out there for part of a power play in overtime when they won in Minnesota. And the real contribution he made to that play, they score on that power play. He's not on the ice when the goal gets scored, but the real contribution was he turns the puck over and he back checks like crazy and makes a
Mhm.
play. You could lose the game, and losing that game would kind of go right back to the way that the previous road trip went. It changes the dynamic of the whole thing. They really needed to win with the way the Winnipeg game looked, at least on paper going in. That's a play that'll stand out every single time, to back
Mhm.
check like that, to make a clean play, not take a penalty there. And then 10 seconds later, you end up winning the game. That'll stand out all the time. If he, because of the foundational aspect of his game, the skating of his game, in his game, everything else will come along as it goes, but that will get him more opportunities as he jumps up into plays, as he becomes more, John Tortorella wants him to be a rover, and we'll see how that plays out. You have to be mindful sometimes of the opposition too. Like, maybe a game, playing a team like Dallas who can also catch you in transition, maybe not the best time to jump up and take chances. And maybe he realized that as the game went along. So he pulls back just a little bit to compensate for that. We'll see if he changes that style against Colorado. Colorado is also a really good transitional team. They've got the players that can skate as well. Maybe a game like a Sunday against Ottawa, a team that's struggling a little bit more, maybe that's the opportunity to be more offensive and change your game a little bit. So he's learning, and obviously 3 games is not near enough of a sample for me to kind of determine a bunch
Mhm.
of things about his game, but certainly the skating has stood out, and we'll see how the other skills kind of come along with that as that continues to build that foundational part.
So, kind of branching off of the new player we just got from a trade, we have a lot of players coming in and out of the lineup. Like we were talking about Frost. Last night, we had healthy scratches of Bobby Brink, Delorier, and Stahl. Do you think that there's any possible trades coming up that we could see in the future? I mean, we kind of got blindsided with this one. We didn't think there was any trades coming, but with so much happening in the lineup and so much change in it, do you think that there's a possibility that we could see another one?
I wouldn't say imminently by any stretch, but they're going to have decisions to make, and tough decisions, because now you're getting into the territory, especially at this part of the season, where we're having that discussion, playoffs and where they are in the standings and how many games they've completed. They have plenty of defensemen now. Obviously, bringing Drysdale in really creates a logjam there, and
Mhm.
that doesn't even include the guys that they have in the minors that have gotten some NHL experience. So you don't if you add those in, it's really an abundance. And I think you look no further than the guy who scored the first goal against Dallas is probably a prime candidate for this. That Sean Walker's going to, his name's going to come up a lot in the next 2 months, basically. And they have to decide whether they feel like this is a guy worth keeping. Is this a guy who they can maximize the return for? Certainly, a game like Thursday's doesn't hurt his value. Um, but they also, same thing goes for Nick Seeler. And Nick Seeler, maybe because of his history with the organization, because it's Walker's first year and he's on, the last year of his contract, they've brought Seeler back a couple of times to kind of be that veteran guy, and they like what he brings and his stability on the back end more than anything. You just added in Drysdale, you just added a guy who could jump up on the play like Walker has. So maybe that's becoming the odd man out a little bit. I don't know that there's going to be, Stahl hasn't played a lot. So there, unless he really kind of forces your hand and wants to go to a team that he thinks has even higher expectations and wants to really get that last shot at winning a Stanley Cup, then I think you honor that for how, good of a professional he's been in terms of being out for so long. But I don't see much of a market for him without playing. So I don't know if you're going to be able to do much with him. And really at forward, like, I don't know that they're going to have much of a market for Delorier only because of the length of contract that's still left. He's still got 2 years beyond this year. Term is what I think is what teams really have trouble preparing for. Delorier's cap hit's not that big of a deal, but term is. So I don't know that they would be able to move him that easily. He might just become the ideal 13th forward. They're already struggling as it is. Let's face it. They're also already struggling as it is to ice 12 forwards because they don't want to take defensemen out. So they've gone 11-7 a lot lately. Brink really should be playing as much as possible. I don't know how good of an idea it would be also to just say, go to the minors. He's really getting good on the fly experience when he gets into these games at the NHL level. He's shown at different moments he belongs here. So it's not worth necessarily sending him down. I mean, I get that you want him to be playing versus sitting on the bench, but really they need to figure out how they want to kind of organize that group of defensemen, because I think you can only go 11-7 for so long before it becomes taxing on your forwards. You're going to want balance at the forward position again. Brink really fits in there, and sure, you can throw Delorier into the lineup to bring some sandpaper back if you need a more physical guy in the lineup, but I don't think that he's going to be a regular anymore. I think they've realized that they've got a group that works really well. And, when you need to throw Delorier in, great, but he's not going to be in every single night. And I don't think there's going to be a rotation either. But Brink is a guy that they have to figure out kind of how they want to approach that going forward. And it's a tough decision to make because he really needs to continue to play for his development. That's the best thing for his future. And yet he's going to continue to be the odd guy out because he's had games where it looks a little overwhelming and where he doesn't look like he's as involved or as effective as some of the other guys in the lineup. So it's hard to take them out, but I don't sense that they have anybody at forward that they want to trade immediately. Defensemen, sure. I think there's plenty of candidates. It's just a matter of who do you want to keep? Who do you think fits this picture long-term? I will say this much. Don't read, just because the move for Drysdale comes across as a little bit buyer-like, I wouldn't change my tune on that just because of where they sit. I think that they more or less probably look for the idea of keeping the band together to maybe try to finish what they started versus just completely selling it off or trying to bring in something and buy. This doesn't change, it doesn't change anything because you have 2 first-round picks that maybe one of them is at your disposal to get better at the deadline. I don't think that that's way too short-term thinking and not big picture thinking. And I think that the front office recognizes that. I think that they love the idea of this is moving along faster than anybody thought. They might make the playoffs this year and still have 2 first-rounders. Well, that's great news. So I think that's the way that they're thinking, but nothing imminent right now, but certainly something to watch as the next couple of months, because I think we're into that territory now. We're down to less than 2 months until the trade deadline. I think it's that territory to start looking.
So again, coming off this 5-game win streak, they're going to be playing another top 10 team tomorrow. How do you think that matchup with the Avalanche is going to go?
I certainly expect it to be a little different than the first one. And the first one was close, don't get me wrong, but it ends as a 5-2 result. And I don't think anybody expected that at that point. They're a great team. And Colorado's had, we know their talent level. We know the type of players that come in to play in a game like this, the McKinnons, the Makars, all of that type of stuff. The thing that's kind of benefited the Flyers especially on this homestand, is the teams they're playing seem to constantly be coming in and playing the last game of an extensive road trip or the last game of an extensive amount of time. Colorado will be playing their 4th game in 6 days. And to travel from playing in Boston on Thursday to travel, have an afternoon game no less as the last one of that stretch. The Flyers just got 2 days off before playing Dallas. That maybe changes things and gives them a little bit more of an edge from an energy standpoint because of that. I think you've got to play to every advantage that you can find. If it's the tired aspect, John Tortorella talks a lot about how tiredness is a mental thing that you can talk yourself into. Well, we've played a lot in the last few days, so we're tired. It's been a grind. We're tired. And if the Flyers can use that to their advantage, and maybe Colorado talks themselves into that kind of mindset, 4th game in 6 days, it's an afternoon game. They're in a different time zone than usual. So talking themselves into, this is just a game where they're not feeling it as much as the Flyers are, maybe that could benefit the Flyers a lot. So it's certainly, they've handled every test that they can possibly get thrown at them from these top 10 teams. Every time we turn around, they're playing one of these teams and they find a way to win. It looked like, when they played Winnipeg, that looked like the odds were stacked against them. They came out of the holiday break and they play Vancouver, who's right at the top. And something that was really interesting is, when they played Dallas on Thursday, Dallas has the most goals in the third period in the league, and they outscored them 3-0 in that category. When they came out of the break and played Vancouver, Vancouver had the biggest goal differential in the second period. They outscored them 3-0 in the second period of that game. This goes back to my point about every number you can throw at them that says they shouldn't do it. They're going against that and finding a way to do things that don't look like they're possible. You go, this is the best team in this situation. This is the best team in this period. They've scored more in this period than anybody else. And the Flyers kind of just laugh it off and go do their thing. So it's helped them win a lot of games against top 10 teams. It's why they're there in the first place. It's why they're ranked 9th in the league in points, because they're there because they beat teams that are in the top 10 and find a way to do it, and maybe do it to a level of, kind of convincing nature. Like, they're close games on the scoreboard, but there's level of play where, they outplayed Dallas completely. That was as a complete a game as there was in all season for them. And, Dallas, obviously a team that, at least for me, and John Tortorella said something to the sort of, well, I think that they're one of the best teams in the league. I had them as as my Stanley Cup champion coming into the year. To do that to them and potentially now have the opportunity to do that to Colorado. You already beat them once, maybe sweep them too on the season series, just like they did with Vancouver. They would just continue to add to the resume if they're able to pull something like that off. And I don't think that the idea that this is another top 10 matchup scares them in the slightest. Yeah. They've put that to bed with just the multitude of results that they've had against these teams already. So I don't think there's anything that worries them going forward.
So there's just a lot of great hockey coming up, and we'll be keeping up with all of that on the 97.3 website, the Instagram, and you can catch it all on there. And we will be back next week to break down some more Flyers hockey.